1 second. Well, let me begin by saying that being a bio boy that grew up with a penis and male privilege, that I have one and only comment to make about abortion. As a man, I fully respect the autonomy and sovereignty of women over their own bodies, and my only legitimate opinion on abortion is that I am required by the privilege of being male to use that privilege to protect in any way and every way any way possible the right of a woman to choose. Any bio male that says otherwise is entitled to have his opinion validated just as soon as he figures out how to give birth through his penis. But this amazing and brilliant conference, from abortion rights to social justice, is centered in a reproductive justice framework. And you can't talk about reproductive justice without talking about sex. And you sure as hell can't talk about sex without talking about HIV, prevention justice, and justice for people living with HIV and AIDS. And I am hella qualified to talk about HIV and sex, considering I have both. Yesterday I was blessed, and I mean truly blessed, to sit on a panel moderated by Alice Wellborn with Sonia Rastogi and Jennifer Marshall. And if you're here in the audience, please raise your hand and wave. If you don't know these women, let me be emphatic in saying that you should. You should know them, you should know their work, and you should know why they are critical to truly creating a reproductive justice movement that is inclusive of folks living with HIV, as well as HIV prevention. These women are working and sometimes living at the intersections of HIV and reproductive justice, and whether or not you have personally been touched by this virus, you as members of the reproductive justice movement have an obligation to live at this particular intersection as well. The right to live full, happy, sexy lives without or with families is the right of every person living with HIV. The right to have mind-blowing, wild, out-of-pocket, hang from the rafters and clap your hands sex is the right of every person living and thriving with HIV. And incorporating sex-positive, desire-uplifting, radical and righteous analysis and messages about sex, love, and HIV are crucial and critical and core to any movement of justice, even more so for a movement on reproductive justice. In a conference with 1,000 attendees, it was telling that there were less than 10 conference goers sitting in that workshop yesterday with Alice, Sonia, and Jennifer. That cannot and must not happen ever again at this conference. Let me be clear, HIV isn't over. It's relevant to your work, it's relevant to your lives. It is not just a disease that affects white gay men. It isn't a disease that impacts only men of color on the down low. In fact, it isn't a disease that impacts only men. Women, and specifically women of color, and even more specifically African American and Latina women, are the fastest growing population of people living with HIV. And with 300,000 women living with HIV in the United States, and women representing more than 50% of HIV cases around the world, you cannot in justice or in faith remove issues of HIV from reproductive justice. I challenge each and every one of you as allies, as conference attendees, and as conference organizers to make HIV more than a side note at this conference and in the places you center your work. Ain't nobody coming to lift the burden and stigma from HIV from us, and doing work around HIV is about so much more than handing out condoms and old, tired, worn out, ineffective admonishments and moralizing that haven't done shit but make a lot of old white men at pharmaceutical companies very, very rich in the last 30 years. It's about creating and building a world that strips the stigma out of HIV, that strips the stigma out of just and healthy choices about reproductive health, and it's about loving, uplifting, and holding high every person that has ever had to make a difficult choice about her body or had to hear the words, "Your test came back positive." So I'm going to leave you with a poem, because I'm a poet, that's what I do. This poem is called H.I.Me. I live with HIV. I have been a part-time junkie trying to find something I missed in between overachieving and the point of a needle. People generally look at me like I'm lying by trying to tell them I'm recovering, and some days much less recovered than others. My mother couldn't believe that her straight A beaver cleaver would cleave to whatever he could snort or swallow or fit in a needle. Powders and pills devouring the pain of little red ribbons, T-cell counts, and technical knockouts by Chelsea boy faggots that see only a status. It might mess with their A-list adventure if they fall for a retroviral warrior, rejecting gentlemanly advances as if being asked to marry a leper. all the while playing Jeopardy, take a hit and then split half open wide to let the next raw cock inside. You see, don't ask, don't tell is all very well in a fairy tale wherein your sexual health is someone else's responsibility. Lord and Savior, I know that there is a responsibility for disclosure, but somewhere it was decided that raw riders got to blame others for riding without a saddle. I am madder than hell that with all my own shit, I have to deal with old bitter bitches that pretend to some moral authority, to do as they say and not as they do and do and do, turn you into a cracked out rehabilitation project filled with so much vehemence. It's funny they can't see the real disappointment, but it's boring to look at the weeds in your own backyard when your neighbor has such a lovely garden. Let me be clear with all y'all in here, if you are choosing to go on a meth-fueled sex affair, my responsibility, the outcomes of your personal decisions stop right there. So happy we got all that in the air. I feel much better. HIV and addiction flying in formation in circular patterns. It's tough to unlearn the poison poured into young ears by the 1980s and shady queers. Never fear, I am well aware that I am a tragically flawed human being. There are choices that I have made that have ripped open the lives of others. A lover that came to me in tears when he tested positive. Confirming my own fear about my status, except I had been too cowardly to take the damn test. At least if I had, it would have only been one life in shambles. In the end, I have more than enough to do without having to take care of you. Let this serve as a final public notice. I am HIV positive. There is a disclosure that everyone wanted. From now on, make your own damn decisions and live with the consequences, because when two adults come to a conclusion that they want a little skin-on-skin action, the minute your legs are in the upright and locked position, it's your job to make sure you don't have a bumpy landing. Am I being unclear? That's your asshole in there, and while another asshole may have told you what you wanted to hear, you are the one that let him steer his jet into your hangar. Check your anger, boo-boo. In this game of cards, a tie goes to the dealer. I feel much better after having written this poem. I know that I have a lifetime of work left to do, hope to never have to write another poem like this, or slip and let addiction back in, but if or when it happens, or when the next person looks at me and sees only a status, I got this in my arsenal. Poetry is sometimes the best ammo. Thank you all for having me here and sharing the space with me.